All right. Well, thank you so much for joining today. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. Right. And- Okay. Welcome, everyone. This is the sixth part in we're not sure how many numbers of sessions. Um, because we are coming up with them as we're going along and get feedback from people. So today's topic is all about work-life balance. Previous sessions have focused on everything starting from what do I want to do with my career through the application process, interviewing, all the way through to offer negotiations. So just know that there are recordings available for those too. You can contact DBSA California to get access to those. Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it today. Just some regular housekeeping items. Please keep your microphones on mute. There will be opportunities to raise your hand and chime in and everything. I will definitely let you know about that when it comes up. But in the meantime, just keep it on mute for right now. You're welcome to put your camera on, but if you're not feeling comfortable, that's totally fine too. You're welcome as you are. And we will have Q&A. Feel free to put questions in the chat, and I'll answer them either as I'm going along or I'll save them towards the end. So if you think of them, just put them in the chat. I will definitely get to them. Let's see here. Our lineup for this evening, just to give you a sense of what we're going to go over. We'll start with understanding your personal needs at work as somebody who, is living with a mood disorder, or any kind of mental health thing, even if it's just a little like stress, normal everyday stress. Strategies for managing your work and energy, communicating with your coworkers and boss, tips for work-life balance, and then we'll go into next steps and some resources for you. But before we get started, my name is Caroline. I am a career advisor, and I also live with cyclothymia and OCD. My perspective for this, again, is coming from somebody who has lived experience, so I definitely do not have all the answers, but I hope to give at least a little bit of context. My experience comes from I've worked in multiple industries. I work professionally as a career advisor, of course, and I have years of experience living with a mood disorder. So just to give you a little bit more of a sense of where I'm coming from and my perspective. So I'll start this off by saying mood disorders affect your emotions and your energy. Like any other health conditions, mood disorders can affect multiple areas of your life, and work is no exception. So, with that context, there are times where your energy is going to affect it in terms of it being lower than usual if you're experiencing depressive symptoms. And there's also going to be periods, if you are on the bipolar spectrum, where you may be feeling hypomanic or manic. And there's ways to sort of adjust for that in the workplace. So again, your mileage will vary, but things including your energy, your concentration, and anxiety could vary while actively in an episode, and that does have the potential to affect your work. So understanding your specific needs is really the key to sort of adjusting things so that you can move forward and make sure that you're productive at work and feeling good. The more you know about your personal triggers for episodes and your specific needs, the more easily you can communicate that and make adjustments so you can stay stable at work. So with that said, we'll go into a couple of common triggers and how to manage those. And I'll say before I go into all of these, everybody's going to have a different one. My triggers may be different than somebody else's triggers, but these are sort of the main themes that I tend to notice with people who have mood disorders or some sort of mental health condition. The first is schedule. Do you have a consistent 9 to 5 schedule, or do you have really variable hours? How many hours do you work per day and days per week? Part-time or full-time? Just in my own experience, I used to work in the entertainment industry, and I worked really irregular hours, very long hours a lot of times. It was very hard to predict. And that that led to more mood episodes than right now. I work in a 9 to 5. I have very regular hours. So understanding it from that perspective of how regular is my schedule, especially because people with mood disorders tend to have very sensitive circadian rhythms. That could be a factor to look at with your work to sort of see where you can make adjustments if possible. Um, the pace. Do you like a fast or slow pace? Does your workload vary from day to day, or is it pretty consistent daily? And how do you cope with shifting priorities? It may be if you're in a fast-paced environment, it might be a little bit too activating, and it might affect your mood. Or you could be somebody who likes a lot of activity and you're getting totally bored in a job where it's kind of all the same thing every day. And maybe that's not the best fit for you because it's not matching your energy. So that's one way to look at it too, is the pace. Your environment is a huge thing in general. Do you work from home, in office, or do you do a combination of the two? Do you have sensitivity to sound or light? That tends to be very common with people with mood disorders. And do you like to be indoors or outdoors? For me personally, I do great working from home, but I also know people who really don't. So kind of understanding like what are your preferences and how does that affect your mood? That can be a key to sort of making adjustments that'll help you to stay stable and help you do your best work. And then people. Are you introverted or extroverted? What personalities do you work well with, and which do you have challenges with? And how do you feel about managing others? Personally, just from my own experience, I know I don't appear it, but I'm very introverted. I just get really tired out, after a huge event. So I know the day after an event, if I'm running it and organizing it and talking to a lot of people, I'm going to be tired and I'm going to have an energy dip. So I tend to plan my schedule around the next day to the best of my ability. I try to do more at home, researchy type things where I'm not interacting with a lot of people. But you could also be extremely extroverted and working from home and not interacting with a lot of people can be, it could affect your energy level as well. So your mileage, again, will vary. All depends on you as a person, but they're definitely things to consider. And I think with that said, we have our first little activity here, which is thinking about what affects you at work. We'll take about 5 minutes to go through this, but think about something that has an effect on your mood at work. And is there anything that could be adjusted to improve things? Totally okay if you don't know. We're figuring it out as we're going along kind of thing. So, all of that said, if anybody has anything that immediately comes to mind, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat and we'll just kind of, we'll see where we're at with different things that work and don't work for people. So feel free to share. And oh, Devin?
Yeah, I would say like the days that I'm like inside the whole time and I finally like go outside after like 4 p.m. or whatever, it really I feel such like defeated. I said I didn't even go outside today. I worked inside and I like all my I just like I judge myself and I feel like I lost without I think I need to get I realize like I need to be outside more for my work. Just
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a big thing, just getting enough sunlight and getting the fresh air. I'll even talk about that a little bit more later in the presentation, but absolutely spot on that would 100% have an effect on your mood at work. I'm seeing a few in the chat. Let me see here. Toxic masculinity, inappropriate comments, etc. Yeah, absolutely. That sounds, very stressful and would definitely have an effect on your mood. Let's see here. Perceiving interpersonal conflicts. Yep, absolutely. Definitely feel that, Denise. Microaggressions, especially from a passive aggressive supervisor. Yep. Yeah, again, the personalities, which ones do you work well with? Which ones do you not work well with? Gaslighting. Yeah, that's also, that's never feels good. Upset every day because your boss. Yeah. So, your interactions with people will kind of affect that. Raw.
Hello, Caroline. Nice to
Hi.
meet you.
Raz,
So
my buddy from the Los Angeles group.
yeah. One of the things that I've realized, I work a lot like on the go now, and that really helps me kind of not get stuck in a particular frame of mind or like get too embedded in an environment and start to like feel things that are unsavory after like being there. So I find that like being confined to a particular space, at least I've gotten very used to being on the go, and that feels very like liberating. But of course, anything in excess can also be tiring because being in traffic and, always having to switch gears and deal with different people and rapid interactions can be a little much, but I'm more extroverted, like on the go type. So I think it suits me well. But, those are the two sides to my coin, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and sometimes just sitting at a desk all day is not a good fit for somebody. Just because it is like the norm in particular industries doesn't mean that has to be the norm for you. You can find what works better for you and go from there. I see a few more came in. Introvert, extrovert, vibrant social environment. Yep, absolutely. I am happy as a clam just being here with my husband at home. But for example, my mother-in-law is very extroverted and she wants to be around people and she gets, bummed out when she's not around people. So definitely that'll affect your mood and your energy level for sure. Having to work early hours when having trouble not sleeping. Absolutely. I have the same thing, Amy. Yeah, definitely sleep is a huge trigger, very common for people with mood disorders. Let's see here. Continuous loud noise, same. I'm very sensitive to sound, and that definitely has an impact on moods and energy. Work from home, yep, it helps me too, Liam. Being in an office helps. Talk, yeah. Yeah, it's nice to sort of have a couple days on, a couple days off. That's what I have right now. So, I can talk to people, but I definitely work more from home than I do in person, which I think works well for me. Let's see here. Trying to focus, challenging, both. Yeah, absolutely. Focus can definitely be affected by either hypomania or depression. Bad weather, yep, definitely seasonal affective stuff. We'll talk about that a little bit too. In terms of different uh, accommodations that you can request. One of them is a light to specifically do that. Um, okay, I'm gonna move on just for the sake of time, but I love this. Please put stuff in the chat with each other. Like, please, I will make sure to read it as soon as we get through a little bit more of the presentation. All right. Schedule adjustments. So now we're going to talk a little bit about energy and sort of working with your energy when you're planning out your week so that you're feeling as balanced as possible. Making adjustments to your schedule can really go a long way in staying stable. So one thing is to work with and not against your energy. Going even beyond, I'm a night owl or I'm an early bird or whatnot. Where do you find you have the most energy in your workday? And then try to plan more active tasks for when you have the most energy and more passive ones for when you tend to be more tired. For example, when I start my day, that's when I'm the most productive. So I tend to do more of my active tasks in the morning. And then after my lunch break, I tend to have more chilled out energy. So that's when I do things like watch professional development things, read stuff, do research, that kind of stuff. Whereas my more social activities, I'll tend to do in the morning just because I know I have more energy in that way. Going a little further, pacing out your work week to the extent that you can is also really helpful. Try to spread meetings and tasks out throughout the week if you can, rather than clustered on 1 or 2 days. This is something I learned the hard way, where I'm like, well, I'll just get everything done in 1 or 2 days and then I'll have a bunch of days where it's really quiet. But I found I was getting so burnt out by, clustering everything so much that it was like, I wound up being more exhausted doing that. So, kind of figure out what your sweet spot is. I found that I can't do more than 3 things in a day in terms of like meetings and those kinds of things, or I'll get exhausted. So researching your energy, kind of seeing when I have the most energy, when I have the least amount of energy, and pacing that out over the week is really useful. Blocking time for rest. So if you have a lunch break, awesome. Block it out on your calendar. To the extent possible, I also recommend getting up and getting away from your desk. Because, if you're at the office or something like that, and you're sitting at your desk even though you're taking a break, sometimes people will be like, well, you're sitting at your desk. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can you do this work thing? So getting up and getting out tends to make it more of a firm break. That way you don't get pulled into tasks, or if you happen to see an email come in, I do that all the time, where I'm like, oh, I was going to take a break. Oh, I'm sucked in. Even if you only have a 15-minute break during the day, getting up and going outside if possible, as we were talking about, Devin, that's really useful. Light and movement can be really beneficial for people with mood disorders. Tons of studies that sort of confirm, movement, light, all that kind of stuff for people with mood disorders can be really beneficial. So if you're given breaks, take those breaks, and be firm about it, like leave the room if possible. Planning for busy and quiet seasons. Now, for some industries, it's always going to be busy, or some industries, it's always going to be quiet. For me, I work at a university. I know the periods of time where I'm going to be busy versus not busy. So, for example, the summertime, because the students are not on campus and everything, I tend to have more time, and it's quieter period of time. But at the beginning of the school year, I'm very busy. So I try to sort of reverse engineer my calendar so that I'm taking a lot of rest in those periods of times where it's quiet, and getting stuff done over a more paced out kind of time, so that I know when it's a busy time, I can just focus on staying well. Especially managing your sleep when it's a busy time, it can be really helpful. So if you have a sense of when it's usually really busy at work versus a little quieter, that can help you kind of plan your week and everything. Um, Another activity. Going into exercise or energy and schedules. Again, same as before, raise your hand if there's anything that comes to mind or anything like that. Or you can put it in the chat too. I'll read as many as I can. Identify something that affects your energy. Could be it increases it, could be decreases it. And is there a way you can make adjustments to your work schedule to use that to your advantage? We'll take like 5 minutes. So if anybody immediately thinks of anything, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. I'm reading too as well. Sometimes you're in a flow and don't want to stop. Yep. I am the queen of that. Set your watch off to go off every hour to move your body. That's awesome. Yeah. Moods affect your energy. Of course, yeah. If you're in a lower mood, when I'm depressed, I feel like I'm moving through mud. So definitely I'm moving very slowly, and that affects my energy. Anhedonia, I used to be a workaholic, but now I feel like I can't push myself. Yeah. So with depression, one of the most helpful things I've ever read is it's a medical condition that affects your energy. When you are depressed, it is a flare up where it affects your energy in a sense where it makes you slower. So understanding it in the terms of like, this is a medical condition really helped me, and made me take a little bit of the judgment out of it for myself. It doesn't always succeed. I still, often beat myself up over it. I cannot say there's any kind of cure all here, but definitely understanding like when you're depressed, you're just gonna have a different pace is useful there. Let me see here. A person who feels appreciated will always do more than expected. I love that. That's so good. Yeah, absolutely. If I feel appreciated, I want to put in more work. So, if you're feeling a good match with your team and your job, that could definitely affect your energy. Differentiate between physical and social energy. Yeah, absolutely. And it can be, in this circumstance, I kept it broad, so it can be your social energy. It could be your physical energy. For me, for sure, my social energy is impacted by how many people I'm talking to in a given day. Insomnia, have no energy after not sleeping the night before. Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then if your circadian rhythms are, kind of off, as somebody with a mood disorder, that can really affect you in a lot of different ways. Um, yeah, these are great. In terms of ways that you can make adjustments to make that work to your advantage, any ideas on that? I know for sure me, I knowing that I tend to be lower energy later in the evening, that's when I tend to do more reflective stuff. And I found that's a really good time to watch trainings and do professional development. So kind of using that to my advantage. And using the time where I have more energy in the morning to get more things checked off my checklist. Right. I'm gonna go back a little bit because I saw some other stuff here. Hyper stressful, working. Yeah, okay. That's adjustment. Learning boundaries. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Yeah, that we'll talk a little bit about boundaries too a little bit later. Yeah. All right. Well, this is great. This is just something to keep in the back of your mind. Never schedule morning appointments or disruptions to my routine, like to ease into my day. Absolutely. I'm exactly the same. Uh, Meetings are typically in the afternoon. Yeah, I also don't schedule any before 10 in the morning because I'm just not awake at that point in time. The coffee has not kicked in. Med changes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we'll talk about ways that you can sort of say, I'm having a med change situation, talk about more examples of what impacts energy. Yeah, absolutely. So again, your mileage will vary. It's definitely sunlight. For some people, it might be if it's a noisy environment versus a quiet environment. Yeah, just and of course, sleep is a huge thing too. If you're getting too much, too little, that kind of thing. So energy can kind of be interpreted in multiple ways. Feel free to, if there's anything I didn't answer, feel free to ask at the end too, but hopefully that answers it a little bit more. All right, so we're going to move on to the next section here. So knowing your patterns will help your communication. If you have a sense of what you need to be well, you can more easily express that to others and advocate for yourself. So the first thing I'll say here is you are in control of what you share with others at work and what you do not. The shared context for your relationships with others at work is work. And one of the things that I always think of too is, your coworkers. If you're friends, that's great too, but that's not an expectation. Keeping it about the work is the bottom line. So, it's your choice to share whether, oh, sorry, 1 second, just letting somebody in. It's your choice to share what you feel comfortable with. But just also remember the context of your relationship is work. So you certainly can and should have boundaries in terms of that. So a few tips for communicating at work. First off, knowing your warning signs is going to go a long way. So taking what you reflected on earlier, sort of what affects your mood, what affects your energy. What are some of your warning signs that you have an episode coming on? And take a note of those. One of the ones for me, beyond just like if I've been talking to people a lot, is if I have a lot of things going on outside of work and it's a busy time at work, I'm just going to be way too tired and overwhelmed. That's when I tend to have really bad concentration. So I know if I've got a lot of things scheduled for 1 week, that's a warning sign that I could potentially have either a depressive or hypomanic episode. For me, it tends to be more hypomanic in that circumstance. But just sort of seeing your own patterns and being like, I am noticing a lot of things here that could potentially trigger something. Being extra vigilant of that and being able to sort of pinpoint it which is sometimes easier said than done, that makes it easier for you to communicate to another person by saying, hey, can I move some of these things? Do all of these tasks need to be done this week, or can some of them be moved out and everything, just because, you understand internally, like, that's going to be too much for me. Setting boundaries, of course. If you notice your warning signs are coming on, that's a great time to set boundaries. If you are fortunate enough to have sick time, that might be a good time to take some of it. Where it's like, okay, I'm noticing this is a busy day. I can't take time here, but the moment that I have a chance to take a break, I should take that time. And adjusting projects, of course. So that would be like, hey, I have all these stuff coming up. Asking your supervisor, what has to be done by what time, sort of getting a sense of the timeline so that you can sort of say, okay, this can wait for another week, so I don't need to think about this. This really needs to be done earlier, so I can plan that out too. So being able to sort of plot it out really well and manage your time can help here. And just, one thing, I kind of fall into this trap too, where I'm like, well, I have to be doing my best because of work. Your health comes first. If you're not feeling well, you need to take care of yourself first, put on your own oxygen mask. So just, looking at it in terms of like, I have to stay well, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to do as much work, or I might need to take a break if I don't take the time now. So setting boundaries in that way is really useful in terms of having your energy level be sustainable. This is something that I've noticed works really well. Being willing to compromise a little bit tends to make boundary setting a little bit easier to swallow. It's like a little bit of honey or a spoonful of sugar kind of thing. So, of course, health should come first. If you're noticing that you're seeing your warning signs and you need to make some adjustments, think about a way that you could adjust it and make a compromise to help another person. So, for example, let's say you had an event overnight, like or you had an event and it conflicted with a doctor's appointment that you had, or it's really early in the morning, and that affects your sleep and your balance. You could say to somebody who was asking you to work that event, or a coworker, listen, I can't really do this particular event, but can I help you prepare for it? Is there something that I can do for you that will take something off your plate so you're still not being overburdened with things, but I'm still getting what I want. So it's sort of like a give and take type situation. I've noticed that's worked really well, because the other person's like, well, sure, okay, we're making a compromise here. So that can be one way to sort of approach it if you're nervous about, like, I don't want to dump work on another person. And then, of course, knowing what will actually help in the circumstance, that will help you ask for it more clearly. So if it's like, okay, I'm noticing I'm not getting enough sleep. Okay, well, what will you need to be able to get enough sleep, to get enough rest? Would that be like adjusting your hours for a little while? Would it be adjusting your start and end time on an ongoing basis? Like, what is going to actually help in that circumstance? That'll make it a lot easier for you to communicate to your supervisor or your coworkers, like, this is what I need and why. So yes, I love that. I call that giving an inch so they don't take a mile. Exactly. Love that, Brooklyn. All right. Accommodations. So I will preface all of this with saying we are going to have, this is a hint for future programming. We are going to have a specialist in disability law and requesting accommodations do a talk with DBSA California in April. But I can speak generally about accommodations here. Mood disorders are considered ADA disabilities. We won't get into the disability, application process too much in depth, but to give you a sense of some basic accommodations that exist, these are some ideas that might be able to help. great question, Harris. I will definitely give an example of that here. Okay, so a few ideas of different accommodations that could be helpful for people with mood disorders. Again, your mileage is going to vary on this. More frequent feedback from supervisors. What I've found with people I've worked with sometimes is that they don't know until it's too late that they've messed anything up. So, especially because you with having a mood disorder, it affects your concentration, it affects your memory and everything. Asking more frequent feedback and guidelines from your supervisor is technically considered an accommodation. So that's something, so as some food for thought. Particularly there's somebody I know who was getting like negative feedback, and she requested, like, listen, I have this mental health, I have this condition, like, can I have this as an accommodation? And she was able to get it. So that is one accommodation that a lot of people don't think of. They shouldn't really have to request it. Good communication is ideal, but you can also request that. Adjusting your start and end times. This will obviously, and I saw that question over the, yes, that's true too. Preferring written over verbal directions or instructions. Yes. So that's another thing, like the way that the feedback is provided is great too. Thank you for bringing that up. Adjusting start and end times. So this, it'll vary on the particular job, the particular shift you have. All of these accommodations tend to be, as long as it doesn't fundamentally change the job. So, if you're scheduled to open a grocery store, you can't really request a change in start and end times if it's like, well, we hired you to do this shift to this shift. But if you're in a job where it doesn't really matter, if you start from 10 to 6, if you wanted to shift it to 9 to 5, you're working the same amount of hours, that would be considered most of the time a reasonable accommodation. Noise canceling headphones. This is a game changer for me. I have really sensitive hearing, and it's common for people with mood disorders. I worked in a cubicle farm at one point, and the noise just carried, and I was so irritable all the time. And I didn't request this as an accommodation, but I did use noise canceling headphones, and it changed things tremendously. But you could technically request that as an accommodation. Light therapy lamps. So if you have seasonal affective disorder, that is one thing that I've seen people request and have gotten too. That can be really helpful if you notice it's a light, if the light during certain periods of the year affects you in that way. Being seated in a quieter area, that was along the same lines as the noise canceling headphones. More breaks throughout the day to handle needs. So if you need extra breaks to take your medication or something, or you need a couple extra breaks for XYZ. That's something you can request. Working from home flexibility. Again, this kind of varies from employer to employer on the, depending on how much it would fundamentally change the job. Obviously if you work at like a retail store, you probably can't work from home on that one as easily as you could, if you're working at an office job where you're not customer facing. Time off for medical appointments, of course. So, that can be on an ongoing basis, or that can be like, hey, I have a doctor's appointment this week. Can I work earlier and then leave earlier or something like that? So both ways that can work. How much should you share? If you do think an accommodation would be useful for your job, you still may not have to fully disclose your condition. And I'll go into what that actually means here. It's giving just enough information to give context. So your supervisor doesn't need to know your whole personal life and everything. And this is like, I learned this from trial and error. Like, I've definitely, like, in certain jobs, I'm like, I should not have shared that much information. Not necessarily, even related to a mood disorder or anything like that, but in general, your supervisor doesn't need to know everything. They just need to know enough to understand the ask. So with that said, I have put together a few tips in terms of requesting accommodations and talking to your supervisor. So first off, knowing who to ask. If it's something relatively minor, like I have this ongoing doctor's appointment. Could I come in an hour early and then leave an hour early? Most of the time you don't need to get HR or HR involved in that, because if it's like a one-off thing, your boss was probably just like, yeah, sure, of course. Or we would hope at least they would be flexible in that way. If it is something that's more involved, or you're not comfortable talking to your supervisor about it directly, then it might make sense to involve HR too. And of course, refer to any HR policies within your organization. Emphasizing the ask. So you don't need to give a long preamble. I get in my head a lot of times because I have OCD, where I'm like, okay, well, let me make it make sense so then I can get into the thing. They really don't need that much information. It's like, hey, listen, this is kind of I have this thing, this condition. This would help me do the thing. Could I have the thing? Like they want to hear the end part of the sentence. They don't necessarily care about the first part as much within the context of their work. So remember that they want to hear what the ask is. So emphasizing that part can be helpful here. Medical condition. Mood disorders are medical conditions. So you can use general terminology that would be used for any medical condition, without actually stating that diagnosis, which I recommend actually. One way that I put it is, I have a medical condition. I have flare-ups periodically. I'll inform you if anything is going on, if I'm experiencing symptoms or anything like that. And generally that's sufficient information for your supervisor, just saying like, listen, I have this condition, it's flaring up, this is what I need. Generally that's the extent of really what they would need, unless it gets into, they need documentation from HR or something like that, and that's a whole other story. Reasonable accommodation. So again, the exact quote is, not imposing a disproportionate or undue burden. So it's an adjustment to the job and not changing the entire nature of the job. So there are ideas for, what would be a reasonable accommodation here, but just know that depending on the nature of your job, maybe not all of them would make sense within the type of job that you're doing. And of course, refer to any HR policies. That's a variable depending on the organization. So make sure to research that part of the job. Usually on the company website, they have a section on HR. They'll usually you'll get an employee handbook when you start. So just refer to any of those policies if you are considering requesting any accommodations. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you liked the flare-up thing. Awesome. All right, so this is the last section here. This is all about work-life balance. We have one more little activity, and then I'm going to open it up for any questions you may have. So, in terms of work-life balance, you work to live. Try not to live to work. The goal of work is to give you a way to get the money that you need to do the things that you enjoy, and to live a life that you are happy with. The whole concept of do what you love and you never work a day in your life was, I joke within my office, like that was the worst possible advice anybody could ever give. Because it sets up this expectation that work needs to be like part of your identity. And I think, you're more than just your job. You should be using the work that you should enjoy the work you're doing. I'm not saying that. Absolutely, you should enjoy what you're doing. That makes it easier. But you are definitely more than just a person doing a particular job. So, to the best of your ability, remember that and try not to like over-identify yourself in that way, because you are so much more than that. Oh, wrong way. So some tips I like to say this is staying balanced to stay balanced. So by that, I mean having a good work-life balance will help you to stay balanced mood-wise. So A few general tips. Again, your mileage will vary. Some of these might work for you, some of these might not. These are some things that I thought of. But these are some ways you can ensure you're prioritizing balance outside of work. All right. Your time after work is your time. Not only have you earned it, but it's been proven to make you a more effective employee when you have time to rest. I've seen so many studies saying that in the United States, people take less time than they're allotted with their time off. And part of that is just because they give you a lot of work and you can't really take the time, even though it's granted to you. But there's also been studies shown that people who take more of their time tend to come back and be a more productive person when they come back from their break. So understanding that it's your time that you earned, but it's also going to help you at work. That's one way that you can kind of reframe things if you're feeling guilty about, taking a break or anything like that. I recommend having a wind down routine. These became very popular after the pandemic, but I still think they're useful. Put your work stuff away, step away from your computer, go for a walk. A lot of people were adding this into their routine because they were working from home, and the whole element of winding down with a commute was gone. But I do find going for a walk after the end of the day can sort of reset your brain to be like, I'm done with work, I'm moving into leisure time. Anything that's going to signal to your brain to stop working and start resting can be helpful. And for me, I tend to end the day with a little bit of gentle movement. So I'll set aside some time to just get up, walk around, maybe lift some weights a little bit. Something that's going to sort of reset my brain so that when I do that activity, my brain is already associating it with I'm not working anymore, I'm relaxing. Treat hobbies and interests as priorities. Put things you like to do on your to-do list. This has been a game changer for me because I love a good to-do list. I love checking things off, especially when I'm hypomanic. So put like, go watch a TV show, go crochet, go walk around the block, like go to the store and get ice cream, like anything that is like a nice hobby type thing. Put that on your list and schedule dates with yourself to do those things. So one of the things is every day at 4 o'clock, I have exercise time. At some point between 4 and 5, I have to do some sort of exercise. But I set it aside like it's a little date with myself. So that made it a little bit more appealing to do it. But make sure that you're prioritizing those too. They are important. Movement, of course. It's been clinically proven that exercise can improve your mood. Incorporate a little moving into your day. Even a 15-minute walk helps. Sometimes I'll even just walk in place while I'm watching a YouTube video. And that's, obviously I hope to get outside on most days, but in a pinch it works too. Staying mindful. Find an activity that will help you to be mindful. I am personally someone who does not like guided audio meditations, which I think a lot of times people will go to that first. That's great if that works for you, but it doesn't always work for everyone. And I think that's okay too. So I put together a list of some different activities that can help you be mindful that aren't necessarily just a guided audio meditation. One is simply silent meditation. So putting on some soft music, maybe the sound of rain or something like that, and just sitting and quietly just, pondering. My husband calls it, he's like, oh yeah, you need time to like ponder. That can be helpful. I personally find that more useful just because with the audio thing, I wound up overthinking it and just like, I don't want to hear somebody talking to me. I just want to do it myself. Journaling and creative writing can be really useful. Reading, mindful walking is a good one where you just go outside and you walk and don't listen to music. You're just observing your surroundings. Arts and crafts, for me, it's crochet. Last night I was at group and I had a big ball of yarn. I was just crocheting the whole time. Got me into nice little flow. And I was able to listen to people better too. Mindful eating, so just sitting and, slowly savoring those tastes and textures and everything, listening to music, anything really that gets you into a flow state. So anything where you feel like you could lose yourself in doing the activity is good. And incorporating more of that into your day will help you sort of reset your brain so that I'm in the life phase right now. I'm not in work phase right now. And I'll also just say many of these activities are featured in DBSA California monthly programming. So feel free to check out the website for days and times. We have a wonderful art therapy session every other week. We also have a creative writing expression group too. Definitely check out the website. They've got a lot of good stuff there, and we're hoping to have more. And of course, practicing good sleep hygiene. Sleep is so important for people with mood disorders as they have sensitive circadian rhythms. And setting a get sleepy routine and trying to keep your sleep wake hours consistent, that'll also help you not only with work, but also, in staying stable in all parts of your life. All right. Last activity. We'll do a little bit less than 5 minutes on this just because I want to leave time for people to ask any questions. But what's a hobby of yours or something that relaxes you? And how can you prioritize doing more of that activity? Again, for me, it's crocheting. So I love doing that, and that helps calm me down. Reading, yes, I love to read too, Denise. That can definitely be something to incorporate more in your day, taking breaks to read and prioritize that. That's awesome. Pickleball. Awesome. I've never tried pickleball, but I love the name. Alpine survival videos. Oh, cool. Yoga. Yeah. Lower energy movement. Yes. Yoga, dancing, swimming, walking. Mobile game for 5 minutes. Brain breaker. I like that. That's great. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I do a lot of these things too. I do love yoga. I do like if I'm doing during my exercise date, I'll do a more active one, like more of a power flow. And then before bed, I like to do it too. It kind of eases me into getting sleepy. Um, yeah, these are great. I love these. So, knowing that these are things you like to do, maybe think about ways you can prioritize doing more of those, even if it's like you put it on your to-do list, or I'm setting a timer, I'm doing this for this amount of time. I find that works really well for me because I tend to hyper focus, and I'm like, okay, I can't be focused on, this thing anymore. I need to take a break and do something else. So even like a Pomodoro timer situation. And for people who've gone to these presentations with me before, you know how much I love the Pomodoro method in terms of breaking myself from hyper focusing. That's awesome. I do want to keep it moving just so that there's plenty of time for people to ask questions. But I'll close this out with, just knowing yourself will help you to grow and be balanced in all areas of your life. Having that self-knowledge will help you to communicate your needs at work, and, to communicate with the people in your life more effectively too. So some resources. If you signed up on Eventbrite, you will get an email with some worksheets and templates. I have a really great set of worksheets from the DBSA National branch, all about occupational wellness, as well as a little worksheet to sort of think of like what helps me stay well and everything. So if you registered on Eventbrite, you will automatically get that. Email DBSA California for access to previous recordings of these sessions in the series. We do have them all recorded. I added a link here to a list of accommodations for people with mental health conditions from the U.S. Department of Labor. The Job Accommodation Network, JAN, has a template for a letter requesting workplace accommodations that really just kind of gets to the meat of it. Like, I need this, please give me this. To sort of frame, in terms of how much you share, how much you don't want to share. And of course, we do plan to host another workshop specifically related to disability and requesting accommodations with an expert in that area. We're looking at April, so just keep that on your radar if that's a topic you want to learn a little bit more about. references. Thank you so much. It looks like we have 8 minutes. I'm gonna stop my screen so I can see all of your lovely faces. We do have a meeting coming in right at 6:30. So if I don't get to all of your questions, I apologize in advance. But if you have any that we didn't get to, you'll get my email from the Eventbrite worksheet thing that's going out.